Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Roundtable Unlock Your Creative Genius and Get Paid for It. It is so wonderful that you made the decision to be here today and join us in this life-giving conversation. My name is Rosine Kushnik, and I'm delighted to be the host of this series of roundtable discussions. I have made it my business to support artists to live their full potential. Before we get started, if by any chance you can't listen through the entire conversation, but would love to do so, the video will be available for another 24 hours after its original posting time. And you're most welcome to download the conversation by clicking on the Treasure Chest for Artists, a compilation of all the videos of this roundtable. And today I would like to say a warm welcome to Jessica Saran. Jessica Saran is an artist, a guide, and a psychocartographer. She makes images that help people connect to the truth of their own experiences. She is currently living in Prague, the land of her ancestors, where she maintains an active studio practice while helping other artists to consistently make the work that they are here to make. She recently published her biggest art project to date, a book and a series of paintings called Field Guide to the Czech Psyche. Welcome, Jessica, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. I'm really grateful that you can be part of this series and share with us your great wisdom and experience as it pertains to artists.
Thank you.
And, to start out with, I would love to know more about what does it mean to be a psychocartographer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I can, and it's certainly a question that I get asked often.
Yes, I would imagine.
Partially because it's not really a field or a term that exists anywhere else. So when I was really, in the last couple of years, I've been in the process of really trying to hone in and identify what exactly is it that I do. And along the lines, I was doing some research, and I came across the field of psychogeography, which was really developed in the 60s in France. And the idea is, let's look at how the urban environment affects our psyche and our ways of being. And so I'm so interested in our internal experience. So how do we make sense of the world, and how do all of these forces that we're constantly engaging with and surrounded by, how do they affect the way that we experience ourselves and the world around us? And my work has often been thought of as a kind of map, or map making. So I kind of put all of that together, and I decided, well, I'm really a psychocartographer because I make maps of the inside and of internal experience.
I like that.
Yeah, thanks, me too.
And what do the Czech people feel about how you're representing them?
That's a great question. I think it's hard to say because Czechs are a little uncertain as to whether or not my book and project is for them. It's this question of, well, what does an outsider have to say about us? So it causes a lot of introspection, which is great. And I think any time you have somebody looking at your culture and making some generalizations or poking and starting to ask questions, it can be very confronting. So it tends to really be kind of a mixed bag where some people are really curious and want the perspective of an outsider. And then other people naturally start to feel kind of uncomfortable because it's really posing these hard to ask questions.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I love it.
It must take a lot of courage for you to do this as an outsider. It's like, and you're not just an outsider, your ancestors are from there, so it must be a very fine line for you to walk.
It is. It's fascinating. And I think that one of the things that my position as an outsider has really allowed me to do, which has been amazing, and it kind of means I don't have to have as much courage in a way, because I get to ask the questions that an outsider gets to ask. So I can, I have Slovak ancestors, but part of why I'm here is because I knew so little about this country and culture. So I'm starting out and I was asking these really basic questions, that anyone who is from this area would know the answer to. But because I was an outsider, I had a lot more freedom, I think, to ask these questions and just let that curiosity be okay.
And have you found a lot of answers about your own self?
Yes, actually. I was the one in the family who was always longing to understand more about the past. And specifically for me being an artist in my family, which is a rarity. So one of the things that happened was when I moved over here, my mom and I actually found and reconnected with some relatives in Slovakia.
Wow.
And turns out that there is a whole artistic lineage.
Oh, really?
That I knew nothing about.
Wow, that gives me chills.
That's
amazing.
Really profound for me. And there's this lineage of strong, interesting, creative women that I've been able to connect with since being here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's such a gift. It's amazing.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would love to hear from you. I know you work a lot with other artists, really supporting people to own their artistic skills and find a way of developing a relationship with these skills so they can share them in a way that is expansive for them as an experience rather than one of those, daunting experiences. And I was wondering if you could share with us about 3 of your approaches or ideas and understandings of what really supports artists, whether they are already, big famous and successful, or they're just starting to pay attention to that little voice that says, oh, why don't I draw a little bit?
Yeah.
How do you work with people? Or shall we say play with people?
Yeah, I think I love what you said in terms of what do you start to do once you hear all of those little voices or once the voice starts becoming louder? And for me, one of the big things is I was never the artist who had an easy time making it. And so I understand really well how hard it can be for a lot of people. And that I found that one of the things that really is so powerful and transformative is when we really start to listen to all of those voices. Whatever they may be. Because sometimes the voices are saying things that we really don't want to be hearing. And sometimes they contain the most valuable nuggets of information about what our authentic creative voice really is. And so one of the things that I'm always doing in my own process, and then when I'm working with other artists, is really listening for those, oftentimes the information comes out in this sort of dismissive, like, for example, I don't really feel like doing this, or, I was working with a woman who really wanted to start doing more collage. And she kept saying to me, but I don't want to use scissors and cut the paper. I just want to tear it. But she had some idea of what collage was. And these were the materials we use, and this is how it was done. And as soon as I honed in and said to her, wait, you want to tear it? Like, tear the paper. Like, really listening and giving ourselves permission to honor all of these different inclinations and strong aversions. And I think that's been one of the most powerful things for me as a creator. And I find that really paying attention to those little things can be what really helps us to start getting beyond all of those shoulds and ideas of, how we have to make art, or, these technical hang-ups. And then we start to find our real rhythm and our real voice and the materials that really start to resonate with us.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like, I encounter it often with artists that they have an idea of what they should be doing. Mm-hmm. And when I help them question the shoulds, and I kind of radically step out of their box and say, well, what if you try that? Or what if you consider this? And they're like, really? I can do that? That would be so much fun. and yeah, and then the moment they tap into what it is that they really would like to do, and have somebody else giving them official permission, that's often what I find is it's as simple as that. To get an external voice to give you permission to do what you already know you want to do.
Yes.
And
yes,
then
that mirroring.
And when that happens, it opens up a whole I want to say box, but it's not a box. It's a well of inspiration and ideas that then one leads to the next.
I know, that moment is just pure magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so interesting because by definition, creativity means we're giving birth to things that don't exist yet.
Right.
So we have to be listening all the time because whatever we're about to give birth to, it has no precedence ultimately.
Right.
So we have to step into that zone of unprecedented activity and ideas, and kind of there's a naughtiness to it, I think, too, that's really exciting. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, but yeah, I'm really excited by this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And how else do you wiggle artists out of their little places?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think is really essential and hard for a lot of artists to get their head around, and the general population, which doesn't make it easier, is something I like to sum up in a phrase that one of my dear professors said, and it's about discipline. And he said, we have to set up the banks of the river so that the water can flow through.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and it's this idea of showing up for ourselves on a consistent basis, showing up in our studios, and trusting that by showing up, by being there over and over again, we're essentially creating the most conducive conditions for something to happen. And we don't have to know what's going to happen. We just have to, I think the biggest hurdle sometimes is just getting ourselves there. And getting our butt in the chair, or getting the water in the paint bucket and saying, like, I'm here, I did my part. And then waiting for that inspiration, or allowing it to the impulses to start coming in. Because I think so often, as soon as we're there, and maybe if we're just sitting in front of the canvas, before you know it, there's this impulse to pick up the brush or to mix this paint color, you know, or whatever your medium is. But I think something starts to happen. And that kind of continuity and creating a continuum with the work just creates opportunities for more to happen and for us to go deeper and deeper into our own creativity.
Yeah, very, very true. And you know, I find it a very fine line again. When I work with my clients who aren't just painters, they're all different kinds of artists. And some of them, what you just described, works really, really well. Like that's what they need. Like that container of actual carving out time, showing up in a specific space at a specific time for a specific reason. And I've also observed the opposite, where somebody, when they started working with me, they anticipated that I'm going to tell them that they had to go to the studio every day a certain amount of hours, and she was resistant to that before she even started working with me. And the irony of it all was that in the first session, we figured out that this is not how she works the best. The way that she works the best is get in her car, drive around, go to a cafe, just go wherever she wants to go, take some notes, go to a gallery. And again, having somebody outside of herself, giving her the confirmation and permission to do what she wanted to do. Here's a fly here. She's a very creative fly. And it was a revelation to her to not have to go to the studio for a certain amount of hours every day. And so how do you, and there comes a point where you need to bring back in that element of discipline. There has to be a balance, a give and take between the structure and how do you fuel the inspiration and the ease and the fun, the play around it, so that when the person goes to the studio, they're not all clamped up, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you work with that? With the people, with the artists that you work with?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question, because I think anything that creates that sort of rigidity or sense of I'm doing this because I have to be is not what we're after. And also I really think that our creative practice extends so far beyond just what happens in the studio, which I think is so much of what you're speaking to. You know, it's like, I think of all of the things I do to maintain a healthy, creative inner life, and that includes exercise. That includes rest, days off. Like, you know, and I think that the key is to really connect to ourselves and what serves us on a deep, deep level, and then show up for that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think there's those moments when we have to disrupt the pattern. Because it has become rigidified in some way. And I think that we're always kind of walking that fine line between the spontaneity and the flow, and then the continuum, you know, I'm here, I've shown up.
Yeah. And I think that ties back into the listening. To
Absolutely.
really listen, is this now a useful structure that supports me in connecting with my creativity, or am I being rigid?
Absolutely.
Is what I have set up for myself, is it stifling me?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that I really honor the fact that creative beings, there's so much to really understanding what supports that. That I think it's a really complex and a lifelong
Yes.
process.
Yes.
You know, and whatever that needs to be for each creative person, I say that, like, fully support that. It's just this process of let's identify it and commit to ourselves. You know, whatever that looks like, let's commit to ourselves, because I think it's so easy as artists and creatives to put it at the bottom of the list.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
And you know, the very, very creative part about supporting artists to be their best is that that in itself is very creative. Because every artist is completely different.
Yes.
And whatever works for one artist, you know, just works for them. And there's a whole creative process in finding out what works for any given individual. And it can be quite the opposite of what works for one and what works for another. But I think the elements that each and every individual artist needs to kind of examine for them, I would say they are the same. The question is, how do they end up sculpting that part?
Yes.
Right? Like for some artists, they really do best with a very regulated schedule. Exercise is scheduled, meals are scheduled, time off is scheduled, fun time is scheduled, everything is scheduled. Because if they're not scheduled, they so easily go all over the place where they might actually lose their connection with their work. And with other people, like the client I just mentioned a minute ago, she needs the anti-schedule.
Yes.
The moment she has a schedule, it doesn't work for her.
Right.
And it stifles her connection. So what would you say are the elements that are useful to any artist to kind of assess for themselves? Oh, and we've already touched on a few. You're welcome to repeat them or expound on them and add more. What have you noticed are really good things for artists to decide for themselves?
Definitely. Yeah, I think certainly this question of routine or lack thereof is a big one. I think we tend to be wired one way or the other quite often. You know, and really honoring that, I think, is really, really important. I also think that there's a lot around what we do before any creative activity and after that's really important to consider.
Yeah.
You know, like, do we need to go to a museum? Do we need to read something inspiring? Is it best to meditate? You know, do we want to make art after we go to a party? Like, really looking at all of those conditions. And then again, afterwards as well, because I find that in the creative process, we're often so open that we need to really take good care of ourselves afterwards as well, and know what might tend to come up for us in that moment after we've just been this open channel. So I think those things are really important. Conditions as well. You know, do you like working alone? Do you thrive in a group environment? Would you prefer going to a class to do all of your creative activity? Or do you need the house completely silent or a solitary studio?
Yeah.
I think
outdoors.
Right. Do you need to mix it up? I think, and I'm trying to think of others, but I think I love the way that learning about ourselves as creative beings and artists teaches us so much just about our lives and our preferences and tendencies. And I feel like it really helps us to just craft an entire life that best serves us.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. And I think also the question of support. What kind of support do you need?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want feedback? Do you want others looking at the work? And at what point, if so? You know, and then things like, does applying for a show get you inspired? Does writing a grant proposal get you inspired? Like all of these things, you know.
Yeah. Or is it the opposite?
Right. Yeah. Should you just avoid that and do your thing?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I really love how you list all these different considerations, and there's always more, and every
Mm.
individual can just engage with that question of what really supports me, because it moves you right out of the should.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have these preconceived notions of an artist is supposed to do this, or an artist is not supposed to do that. And the moment we shifted into the question of like, what would work best for me? Just like an open-ended question. And think about it, go for a walk, journal about it, and really allow the information that is already there to come into your conscious awareness,
Mm-hmm.
because pretty sure it has been waiting there.
It is, right? It's always right there.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's like really listening in those little like, oh, I don't want to do that, or God, I don't want to go there, or just like that. It's right. It's usually right there when when we're really listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I think it's really fascinating that sometimes in a field where that is all about creativity, sometimes as artists and as a society perceiving artists, there's so little room for creativity, in that we have these very fixed ideas of what an artist is like. You know, I can't tell you how many times I hear people saying, "What? You have a schedule?" Or "I can't just stop by anytime?" Like,
Yeah.
or "You don't just sit in cafes all day?" You know, just all of these belief systems that stop us from getting outside of those shoulds, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think what you just touched on, like, oh, I can just stop by anytime I want to. This whole idea of really setting your workspace and time as your workspace and time, your sacred space and time, and you actually take charge as to what happens, not internally. That's like you create the outer space so that you can really open up to the internal process, and you set the stage for your internal process to unfold in a way that you feel really comfortable and safe with. And if people assume they can just stop by at your studio at any given time, that takes that whole feeling right out of the equation.
Yes. Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And I think it's this idea of making it a non-negotiable, you know, and taking it seriously. Like, this isn't just some frivolous activity.
Right.
That it really matters. And we all get to decide how much it matters or where it falls on the list of priorities and how it serves us. You know, but wherever that is, that when it's time and it matters because it makes such a difference in our lives. You know, and I think that we all start to notice so distinctly when we haven't been creating. You know, we start to suffer.
Yep.
And I find that it just spills out into all these other areas of our life. Whereas when we make it a non-negotiable and we do whatever it is that serves us, everything flows much better.
And you know, you're actually raising two very interesting topics. The one that I find is really valuing one's creative process and even creative products, if you want to call them that, the whole conversation about value and self-worth and all of that goes right into somebody feeling entitled to saying, this is my work time, I'm not available. I see a lot of artists starting out with a big struggle around that. And the other one, I just forgot. Oh, yeah. You were saying that when we don't create, we move, sooner or later, we start to suffer.
Mm.
And there is this myth of the suffering and starving artist. And the way I know you, we are both on the mission to put an end to that myth. There's no reason to have suffering and starving artists. It's just a matter of changing your conversations and your habits and where you resonate with. And so these are two kind of opposite conversations. One is about the self-worth, and the other one is about letting go of the addiction to suffering and choosing the concept of thriving. You know, what about that?
Yes.
Which actually ties us right back into the self-worth.
Yes. Yeah, I think for me, it's always important to remember that we are in a particular moment in time in history as far as what we value culturally, and then really taking the time to examine what are our beliefs, what beliefs have we internalized around what's valuable. And certainly I think the masculine producing in a certain way, you know, being a functioning member of society in an industrialized world, essentially, means a certain kind of productivity. And I think that creativity and the feminine just isn't as valued yet. And I think that's part of what we're all pushing to bring more of, and more real, genuine appreciation of that into the world. And I think then it becomes such a personal and individual, almost a battle. I don't know what the right word is, but to really have the conviction, to stay really connected to our truth and our knowing that, I mean, creativity is it's the essence of everything. You know, and how do we value that and value those gifts that we have that might not fall into the categories that we've been told are valuable? You know, so I think there's a lot of redefining that we're in the process of doing. And I just so honor everyone who's engaged in it, because I think it's such a noble and necessary task. You know, and I think too, when we've grown up being creative beings, but are constantly told or led to believe that's not valuable, it's not a possible career path, of course our self-worth and our sense of value starts to go down the shitter. I mean, the thing that we know we're here to do, we're being told over and over again, there's no place for that. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's a hobby.
You might as well disappear.
Right. It's so I think we're just in it when it comes to all of that, doing the work. You know, that's what we're all doing, I think, and carving out more space, and you know, hopefully shifting this in society and for future generations. You know, I have a 3-year-old niece, and I think about, wow, you know, to have an aunt who she's just going to see somebody living a creative life, following her dreams. Suddenly that's the possibility. It just becomes normal.
Right.
You know?
Awesome. And not just for your niece, but for so many other people, all the listeners today, all the people that you work with. I think we can never quite know what impact we have by just simply living our lives the way we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
I would love to hear more about your understanding and perspective of where we specifically are at in human history now, 2014, compared to, let's say, 1920, 1960. You know, it's a very distinctly different time, and every time period in human history has been obviously accompanied and reflected by the artists of its time. And I'm just very curious, how do you see your role and the impact and the possibility, the opportunity? Like, how do you link your work to the times we're in and what our times are calling for?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question. You know, just recently I was thinking, I've been reading Virginia Woolf's diaries, and I was also watching videos and reading about Louise Bourgeois, and thinking that it's only been, it was, you know, they were making art in the last 100 years and struggling heartily to be women doing this.
Yeah.
You know, like Virginia Woolf talking about a room of her own. It's just not that long ago. And so I think we've progressed, we've come so far in so many ways in the last 100 years. And I think one of the interesting things as well is just the development and the emergence of psychology as a field. You know, where I think a lot of art and creativity has been, part of it is in service of our healing. I think it always is. But our knowledge of the internal world, you know, has just developed so much in the last 100, 200 years that I look at even some of the ways I think that Virginia Woolf was tortured. You know, like struggling to use art and creativity to bring more awareness, to change society. And I was thinking about how we know so much about that now. Psychology, it's on the table. It's on everyone's table. It's part of the vocabulary. It's part of the conversation. And so I think now, in a way, that what we're shifting into is in part out of this suffering mentality that has to do about creativity being in service of consciousness. You know, what, getting beyond just the psychology of the individual and the personal, but getting into like the really, who are we really on a much bigger level, and that we can tap into that to really heal, to really do a lot of collective and individual healing. And I think that's amazing. And also that I think we're in a moment where, you know, we had a matriarchy, we had a patriarchy, and I think we're entering into a real time where we can integrate the masculine and the feminine energies. And I mean, that's the essence of what gives new life. The masculine and the feminine coming together. So I think that's like, ooh, what does this really mean now? If we can, you know, harness those energies in a really, like, in the positive, beautiful ways that create new life.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And you know, the way I heard you speak earlier, and now tying it to what you just said now, I get this image of you utilizing your masculine wisdom to set the space, put the boundaries, make decisions around when and how you work and all of that. And then it's really in service of allowing your feminine side or the feminine wisdom to come forth in the creative process. Do you identify with that, or does that?
Wholeheartedly.
Wholeheartedly.
You know, the metaphor of the container, and that I'm constantly trying to create the container and the conditions so that that feminine energy can swirl around inside of it and have a place to be and to really, to really create from that. But that the container and the boundaries and that masculine energy, I think, is really, really essential. It has been for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is about the integration of those two.
Mm-hmm. And the image that comes to mind is that how we were speaking earlier about what works for one doesn't work for the other and so forth. And when you look at relationships, no relationship is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And even the greatest relationships, none of the greatest relationships are the same as any other one. It's a matter of these two people having figured out what allows both of them to prosper and thrive and be happy. And so that could be a way for artists to look at themselves in relation to their creative process. What would be a good husband in this picture? What would be a good wife in this picture? And regardless of one's sexual orientation, just as a symbol of what would the masculine energy, what would be good for the masculine energy to create so that my version of feminine energy and creativity can really emerge?
I love that. That's so beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we're in such, it's amazing to also be in a time when all of these gender lines are blurring so that we can really play with, like, what's my masculine? Like you said, what's my feminine? How do they hang out and what works? What turns this side on? What turns this side on?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes it so creative.
Right.
You really have to listen.
It's creative on every level, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. 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 And is there any other pearl of wisdom you would like to share with us before we bring it to a close?
I was thinking today about this summit being about unlocking your creativity and getting paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the masculine and feminine energies, I think that one of the things that's been a surprising revelation and really supportive for me is embracing marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And on so many levels, not just that it helps to make money, but it's helped me to step outside of my work and really see it and see what I'm doing in such a beautiful way that I didn't know marketing would offer that in any kind of a way. But I think it's that process of going from being in it and making and being immersed in the process to then stepping outside of it and gaining some objectivity and saying, what is it that I'm doing? And then how does this serve others? Who is this for? And I think that the insight that it yields as far as our own work and then the connections that it allows us to have with our audience, our collectors, whoever's experiencing the work goes so much deeper. And I think it brings a real sense of purpose as well. I think, it's important to, whatever's right for the person, but we often make work because we want it to do something for somebody else.
Absolutely.
So that's been, that's definitely a pearl, I would say, in my experience.
Yes, beautiful. I actually have this theory that is right aligned with that the inspiration that we receive to create whatever it is, that comes from the same source that creates this other person or this other audience or whatever it may be, who is waiting to be touched in one way or the other by the work that any given artist does. And when you start to see it as a circle rather than a line being, here I am, an artist, I do work, here's my work, and that's the end of it. It's not a circle. And the circle where everything in nature goes in circles, and there is sustainability in a circle. In a line, there's no circle. There's no sustainability. And so I believe that the sustainability in the circle is closed by understanding it is part of this initial divine inspiration to be touching someone. And then to get into resonance with who is that and where is that, and just tuning in again to the listening part of where do I find my true north, or whatever it is, my true gallery, my true collector, or again, whatever it may be, where then the circle gets made. And I feel like until and unless our work has touched someone, it isn't complete yet.
Oh, I love that. I feel like I just experienced pearls. It's so beautiful. It makes complete sense to me. It's like there's a need, there's a desire, there's something pulling it into existence through us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, when the masculine understand its role properly, which is not, I'm not going to make it happen, but rather the masculine being in service of the creative process, and then doing the legwork, making the phone calls, making the applications, doing the submissions, whatever it takes, then it all becomes this beautiful, sacred dance where the marketing is as much part of it as the creative process, because it's all part of closing the circle.
Oh, that gave me chills. Yes. I think that union and that integration and being in service of that creativity. And, it's like, I always like metaphors about children and childbearing, that it's like you need that safe container. You need the thing that's going to put the clothes on its back and help it get out into the world.
Exactly.
Have the ego it needs, have the personality it needs, all of these pieces.
Exactly.
So that its essence can shine and function. But we're not just like a little naked baby walking around vulnerable, unprotected.
I love that. I love the way you say it needs a personality. It needs a certain amount of ego to go out there and say, hey, here I am.
Yeah, this is what I have to offer.
Totally. Well, I have a feeling we have a lot more talking to be. A lot more talking is waiting for us in our future. It has been really, really, really wonderful having you here today. It's such a rich conversation. And as we can all see, there is creativity in conversation. There is so much more that we learn about ourselves and about each other and about what is possible in just being in conversation.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. I would love for you to tell all our listeners how they can get a hold of you, because I am sure they want more. And so please tell us how they can go about that.
Yes, my pleasure. So my website is www.jessicaserran.com, and I'll spell it JESSICASERRAN.com. And when they head over there, I have a special free gift for everyone, which is an e-book I developed called Your Guide to Getting Intimate with Images, which is a free gift for everyone who subscribes to help people really get deep with the work they're creating.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much for being here today, but also for just a very deep process that you have engaged with, it seems like all your life, and how you make that available to all of us.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a real pleasure. I'm completely invigorated.
Awesome. And I really hope there will be more.
Me too.
And
Summit.
yes. And thank you everyone for listening in. If you missed any parts of this conversation or you like to hear it again, it'll be available for the next 24 hours for free, or you can purchase all the recordings of the entire roundtable. You can do that as well. And then you have it available for whenever you want to refer back to it. And so thank you. I look forward to connecting with you all in the next installment of our roundtable. Unlock your creative genius and get paid for it.